This is Driving Solutions, exclusively on CBTNews.com.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of Driving Solutions, exclusively right here at CBTNews.com. This year, F&I will continue to be a significant source of profitability for dealers, especially as inventory improves and incentives return to the market. Here to discuss the latest developments in the F&I training and fixed operations sectors and how JM&A Group is leading the evolution of the industry is the president of JM&A Group, Mr. Scott Gunnell. Scott, thank you so much for joining us on the show once again.
Jim, thanks for having me. It's always great to be here, and I look forward to the discussion.
Sure. So first and foremost, congratulations to JM&A Group on reaching the remarkable milestone of 45 years. What is your team focusing on as it looks forward to the future?
I would say three things come to mind. First, Jim, is just dealer centricity. Mr. Moran founded this organization as us being a performance provider to help our dealers be more successful in their journey and their vision of growth. And, we've taken an inward look at our 45th year to see, where there's opportunities that we could be even more dealer centric. And we found a couple opportunities there. We're going to continue to focus on, how do we support, as you mentioned, the future of the business, both this year and for years to come, in a manner that can make our dealers as effective as possible. The second is the consumer. I would say that's a big focus of ours, is as we continue to look at the evolution of the consumer, the interaction with our dealers, how do we position ourselves to best support from a product perspective, from a marketing perspective with content, and ultimately dealers from a training. And then the final thing I would say is just our core infrastructure technologically. We have sat on a technology for the last 45 years that we are changing all the underpinnings of our operation. And that's a bold move for us. It's bold in the sense we're very confident about the future from an F&I perspective, but it's also bold because it's going to give a lot more ability for our dealers and how they interact and work with us on a go-forward basis.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to the future of F&I, where do you think it's headed? I mean, where are you placing your bets?
So I would start with the short term. I think in the short term, as you mentioned, we know that affordability is a concern right now. I mean, there's a lot of studies out there that suggest that the average consumer in America can't afford a $400 to $500 repair on their vehicle today. So we know there's a need. We know that with, obviously more inventory, with cost of funds going up, the dynamic is shifting back to a little bit more of a new normal. So in the near term, it's really a focus on the basic fundamentals of F&I, making sure that we're extracting as much information from the consumer to understand their situation and making sure that we're providing them the best opportunity to protect the investment of the vehicle that fits within their budget, fits within their circumstances. In the longer term, I would say, we're very focused on the connection between still the out of the store and the in-store experience. Mm-hmm. Jim, I literally, before this call, was on the phone with a consumer that bought a vehicle yesterday. And she was telling me the F&I experience took over an hour, and she had a lot of great feedback about how that experience could be improved. And specifically what we were talking about is she does all this work outside the dealership, and when she comes in the store and gets an F&I, it just feels very disconnected.
Yeah.
So for us, it's really understanding how do you connect the points of the process into F&I. It's also helping to educate our dealers and F&I managers around, consumers today, the millennial generation and Generation Z have the most purchase power in the world today. So we know they're digital natives. We know they're seeking personalized, authentic experiences. How do we create that for them in F&I? We're creating it in other aspects of the transaction, but we believe there's a big opportunity in F&I that we're focused on in order to help our dealers.
Sure. And I'm sure the dealers are wanting that. What kind of challenges is F&I up against?
I think we're up against, first, the regulatory world. And I'm not suggesting that the regulatory world is a challenge. I think the work that they're trying to do is good for the industry. The challenge comes in understanding, all of the specifics that are necessary for a dealer to be compliant. The reality is the FTC continues to get a lot of complaints about our business. And so what can we do to purify the process? So that's something in the nearer term. As I mentioned, just the overall normalization and cost of funds and just some of the economic concerns that are in the industry, there's an opportunity there, again, for our dealers to focus. And then just finally, again, I think this evolution of the business, it's, how do we connect the dots? How do we make sure, Jim, that a customer can have access to F&I information without having to come to the dealership. How do we make sure that the customer in the deal building aspect of their transaction can include F&I without needing to talk to a human? And how do we make sure when they talk to a human, when they engage with the dealer, that there's a connection point in that process so the consumer doesn't have to make sure they feel like that they're redoing work that they've already done online or outside the store?
Sure. So what strategies is JM&A Group employing to stay ahead of emerging technologies and capitalize on new market trends and consumer preferences?
Our focus this year is to elevate, evolve, and empower. And so what we're focusing on is the transaction, is continuing to support the transaction, the evolution of the transaction. We've talked a lot about virtual F&I. We passed 30,000 deals last year.
Wow.
We're doing the most on-demand deals every month. We're setting a record with how many of our customers are flipping the process to us for our team nationwide to execute the transaction. We're focusing on the human side of the business. We're focusing on people. We just announced a partnership with a company called RockEd. RockEd is like a TikTok for training is the best way I could describe it, where it's digitally enabled, a individual at the store level, even our team is using it for that matter, but trying to educate and help our teams understand, our teams being JM&A and the dealer teams, understand, how do you maximize each interaction? But what it does is it enables people to learn at their own pace. As you know, on social media, stories and reels and things have gained a lot of attention. There's a lot of, data that authenticates each individual person's experience. So we're doing that from a training perspective. And then finally, on the compliance side, just to continue to educate our dealers around, what are best practices to ensure that we're supporting the most compliant transactions.
With these shifts that you're talking about, how can dealers make sure their staff is not only compliant and competitive in their market, but also stay on the top of the game to meet consumers' needs?
I think it's just back to the basic fundamentals. I think it's if I was a dealer or dealer personnel, I would be looking at, how educated can one of my customers get from an F&I perspective without having to come to the store? I would ask the question, how connected is the process from, selling the vehicle to F&I when it comes to all the work they could do online versus what they're doing in the store? Sure. By the way, Jim, customers want to come to the dealership. As I mentioned, the millennials and Gen Z, data proves that they want human interaction. What they're looking for is just that tailored interaction that's personalized based on the way they want the transaction to go. So I think there's a component of that. From a compliance perspective, we have our file certification. There's other certifications out there. I think making sure that all your teams, the content is updated on an annual basis. I think making sure that they are updated on the process. In addition to that, we formed a partnership last year with Mosaic. Mosaic's big in the compliance space. They're not just F&I compliance, but it's more dealership compliance. I think it's making sure that you look at, the regulations. NADA has set forth a lot of great information about how to be compliant, how to have ownership at the store level, and how to have process to support, customer complaints. I think it's an opportunity to dig in with some of the experts in the space, like a Mosaic, but also looking into your internal operations. What I find is a lot of this stuff's very commonsensical. So do you have endpoints for the consumer to go if they have a problem? How are you solving these problems? Are you aggregating the information around the problems to see that there's a bigger problem in your organization and something that, you should be focused on? It's not just a one-off, but we constantly are hearing this noise from the consumers. We should do something different.
Yeah. Most people know JM&A Group as a premier F&I provider. What other tools and services are you providing to create more comprehensive dealership solutions?
Well, I mentioned two of them. One is the RockEd partnership from a training perspective. Yeah. One is Mosaic from a compliance perspective. We still have the partnership with JD Power that's gaining a lot of momentum. JD Power being a customer brand. As I mentioned earlier, as consumers are gaining more power in the transaction, having a recognized brand like JD Power gives peace of mind to consumers, knowing that JD Power has supported their branding of the products. We still have a partnership as well with Poly. As you've paid attention to, and one of the big drivers of inflation is vehicle insurance. Yeah. And so trying to help connect the dots of a consumer that's buying a vehicle, getting an insurance offering, and Poly is a tool that integrates into that process systematically. So we have that. And then we still have our, traditional offerings that are evolving. We've got our, as you mentioned, fixed operations in your intro. So we have fixed operations consulting that we continue to grow and evolve. We still have our traditional consulting and training. We still have thousands of students a year that are running through our training applications. And so those are things, but we're looking at the market. As I mentioned, Rocket is new. We're always looking for new ways to support our dealers. The final one I failed to mention is we have a partnership with, on the talent side, we're looking at, basically understanding the profiles with predictive index and understanding the profiles of dealer personnel. All of us are different, wired different, motivated different. So a predictive index is a partnership we have to help dealers understand how to best manage their teams. So we're trying to be as holistic as we can because we believe F&I has left the box. We believe that around the dealership, so much of what we're doing blends into what's happening at F&I. And if we could support the holistic environment, the better off we could be.
Wow. Sounds like a full solutions provider now. So what can we expect from JM&A Group in the near future?
What you could expect is more innovation. You could expect some announcements in the future around, us being more involved in the transaction, both in the content side of the transaction and the actual, what makes most sense from a consumer perspective for the purchase side of the transaction. As I mentioned earlier, you could expect a lot more capability that we're bringing as we replace the infrastructure. That capability looks like a lot more flexibility on the dealer side. You could expect more. We launched an online claims solution last year where dealers can go online to submit their claims. You can expect a ramp up of that with more automation. We're using generative AI to help automate the process around, when do we need a human involved in the process? When do we not? You could expect more innovation around virtual F&I, and we've eliminated 2 technologies from the process. So we're continuing to bring more of a systematic tech-first approach to that. So you could expect growth there. And you can expect us to keep, pushing on dealer centricity and pushing on the industry to understand, what does great look like as it relates to what the consumer is looking for and ultimately how the dealer can solve those for those problems or opportunities.
Scott Gunnell, president of JM&A Group, thank you so much for your insight today. Very much appreciated. Thank you all for watching Driving Solutions exclusively right here at CBT News and now streaming on Roku and Apple TV. Scott, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching Driving Solutions exclusively on CPTnews.com.